host program. The views expressed are those of the guests and not necessarily those of the producer. Today's topic:
Problems with a Beautiful Friendship in the Passion for Truth award-winning program.
Welcome to another edition of Passion for Truth. Washington has taken a forceful stand at the militia. Is it about avenging the Marines, or is it about fighting the global war on terrorism? And most importantly, do we have the troops, the money to fight all global terrorists, or should we limit our list to the groups that threaten us? All next with our guests, David Price, former attorney, formerly with the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Chuck Woolery, formerly from the World Federalist Association. The objective of the World Federalist Association is to strengthen UN. Dr. John Welders, ex-president and vice-chancellor of Central Buganda University, and Walda, Director Jubilee Campaign and Honor Just Law International. Ex-Colonel John Brinkerhoff, ex-associate director of FEMA. Dr. Abul Hassan Ansari, a researcher on the critical issues affecting Muslims in India and abroad. Welcome you all.
Thank you.
Starting with you, Dr. Ansari, should we limit our list to the groups that threaten us?
I think you have to balance it out and look at it, who are threatening us and who are not threatening us. I think simply attacking the people or letting others, our allies, to attack those who are not involved with global terrorism. I mean, how do you define terrorism? Terrorist of one country is a freedom fighter for the other country. It mentioned about the Hezbollah. Hezbollah has not done anything against the United States. I mean, they have the right to defend their own country. And this invasion that began, United States should have restrained Israel. We should not have gone that far. Everybody was shouting, yelling, and requesting for the ceasefire. The United Nations did nothing, and United States gave the blank check to Israel, do whatever you want to do. They started talking only about the ceasefire when the Israelis' nose got bloody. Then they have shifted the attention now that they have gone to England. Some terrorist guys were arrested. I really think that I question the timing and the validity of this claim. You know, I have never known that shaving cream can make a bomb and you can blow a plane off. So my feeling is that the United States should limit itself to those who are threatening us. Those you think they are going to threaten you in the future. I think you need to talk to them, bring them on the table, talk to them peace. And I think that a lot of the resolution that can be done on the table will never be able to resolve by the war.
Colonel Brinkerhoff, do you agree with this premise that since Hamas and Hezbollah do not threaten us, they only threaten our ally, Israel, that we do not have much business fighting that terror plot?
Well, it depends on how you regard what's happening in the world today. I'd like to say that, you know, we're not fighting terrorism necessarily, because terrorism is a tactic which has traditionally been used by weak forces to gain political purposes when they couldn't win militarily. So terrorism is a tactic. What we're faced with is a very broad movement of some individuals to use terrorism to gain their objectives, which I believe to be worldwide domination. And if that's the case, then one has to take all of these individual actions into account as part of an overall pattern, whether it's directed by some mysterious one person hiding in Afghanistan or not. There are many things acting, and I must say I take issue with you. I do think that these reports are real, and I do not think that anyone could cook them up or has cooked them up merely for minute advantage.
Well, if this is true, then I really congratulate the Scotland Yard, but Princess Diana died, Dr. Kelly was murdered. They can find the killer. So, I mean, you are so intelligent that you go in somebody's bedroom and find they are making a bomb. You can find the killers of Princess Diana and Dr. Kelly.
What do you
Okay.
request?
Okay, let me turn to Anne. And the British terror plot, is it suggestive of Al-Qaeda?
Well, I believe so. I believe that there's a mentality and a mindset that is behind it. There's statistics that have been published that show 9% of Muslim youth in Britain agree that violence should be used against the West. That was a survey. It was conducted, and 9%. That's a significant percentage. The reasons why are areas that we should continue to pursue to find out why the terrorism, why this mindset that violence should be used against the West. I don't agree it's legitimate, and I think that more should be done to protect innocent civilians from terrorist activity. Innocent civilians in Lebanon who've been terrorized by Hezbollah, innocent civilians in Iraq that have been blown up, one side against the other, all in terrorist actions. I think it's terrible that anyone would put to death women and children for purposes of trying to provoke fear. It's wrong.
I think the point here is, John, that Hezbollah has never resumed violence against the U.S. Should we limit our troops to the groups that threaten us?
Yes, and I think this whole thing is seen by me as the schoolyard bully, one schoolyard bully taunting the other schoolyard bully, and the second one starts pushing the first one. I read in today's paper, for example, that this whole tone of we need to impose our mighty power on these groups. Whatever happened to trying to deflate the issues and trying to sit down and talk about these differences? What I hear over and over again is good guys versus bad guys. And as soon as you label one group or another by either one of these labels, that stops all further discussion, all further negotiations. That's the end of the story. Now you got a war at your hands.
But do you think Hezbollah militants are the same as the Al-Qaeda militants? Because if you lump them all under one heading, under one the terrorists, they are likely to unite and cooperate with each other. Are we doing a harm to ourselves?
Great harm, great harm. The idea of war as a means to solve terrorism is just absolutely ridiculous. War in itself is terror, if you've ever been on the receiving end of it. And President Bush, his campaign of trying to put all these terrorists together, basically he's become the uniter that he promised in his first election. He's uniting these terrorist campaigns into one campaign to fight the United States and Israel. Huge mistake.
David, if we don't make distinctions between these groups, Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda, we could feed Muslim paranoia that the war on terrorism is just a cover for a war on Islam.
I think there's some truth to that, and I think that one has to step back and look at, while, as it was said, and correctly so, the terrorism is simply a tactic. It's an asymmetrical attempt to hit an enemy that's militarily far superior than you are. You can have all types of terrorists out there. It just so happens that in vogue today are the very fringes of Islamic terrorism. Sunni style would be Al-Qaeda, Shia style would be what you have in Iraq with the Mahdi army, and in Lebanon, peculiar to Lebanon, it's a Lebanese element. It is not an international terrorist movement, unlike Al-Qaeda and what you have in the Mahdi army coming from Iran. It is a domestic Lebanese issue which has been made an international group through incredible flow of funds from Iran. So while there are exceptional differences between all of them, they will get together whenever it makes sense to get together. We saw that when Shia suicide bombers were blowing up huge numbers of Sunnis in Iraq, that all of a sudden the top echelons in Al-Qaeda came out very clearly. They were extremely upset with Zarqawi and came out publicly and said, this cannot be. Why? Because now you're dividing the Arab people and it's becoming Shia versus Sunni. So they work together when there's no other funding or ways, and they work against each other when it best suits them and their pockets are being filled.
I don't think it's a matter of funding. If you look at Afghanistan, when the Russia invaded in 1979, December 1979, the war went on, and finally all the fighters from every globe of the world, all the Islamic countries, they went and defeated the Soviet Union. Here, what Mr. Bush doesn't recognize, that by lumping everybody under one roof, you are inviting the big trouble. I heard that some fighter from Indonesia went to fight the Israelis. This is exactly what's going to happen. You are going to unite the terrorists, whatever you call terrorists, freedom fighters, Hezbollah, Hamas, whatever you name, you want to give it to them. Once they get united, you are going to have a bigger problem than if you deal with them individually.
Colonel Brinkerhoff, the problem is that US does most of the fighting, dying, rebuilding, and paying, and it's a good deal and sweet deal for Israel.